This is Kimberly Scheit, and today I'm going to discuss the characteristics of the disabilities we've covered this semester and the universal design for learning strategies to help every student become successful. We'll begin with specific learning disabilities. This is the most prevalent of disabilities. The textbook definition is a disorder in which one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using language spoken or written. Students struggle in the areas of oral expression, listening comprehension, written expression, basic reading skills, reading fluency, reading comprehension, and mathematics, calculations, and reasonings. What this means is that no two students will show the exact same strengths and weaknesses. Where one student may struggle in one area, another will struggle in many. Students with learning disabilities are quite capable of learning, but their academic performance is low due to their inability to learn and process new information. The term includes students with conditions such as perceptual impairments and brain injury, but does not include learning problems that are the result of visual, hearing, or motor impairments. Two such include dyslexia and mathematics disabilities. Some students cannot tell the difference between a B and a D. Mathematics-wise, they struggle with applying mathematical steps to solve a problem, time telling, or fractions, to name a few. Ways that I could help them would be to offer graphic organizers to bridge the gap between what they already know and what they are about to learn. For my presentation, I would use video, audio, and podcasts to get my lesson across. They would be allowed to use text-to-speech apps. To keep their interest, I would allow them to choose an appropriate topic to keep them interested, such as soccer or music. Additionally, I would offer frequent feedback, self-monitoring checklists, peer buddy, or small group work. Communication disorders adversely affect a child's ability to talk, understand, read, and write. It hinders their speaking ability due to anatomical or physiological abnormalities in the skeletal or muscular areas involved in speech production, which results in speech-language disorders in the areas of articulation, which is when they are unable to produce the sounds and sound combinations of speech. For example, they will substitute by saying boo instead of blue, add saying tari instead of tree, or distort, such as a lisp. These are common when children are learning language. The concern arises when they don't grow out of them. Additionally, speech disorders covers apraxia of speech, voice disorders such as pitch, duration, intensity, resonance, and vocal quality, and fluency, which is the rate and rhythm of speech. Stuttering is a good example of fluency disorders. Speech and language disorders can fall into the categories of receptive and or expressive or associated with another disability. Language impairments involve impairments in the following areas of phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics. To help these students out, I would present my information in more than one format, such as audio and visual. Use graphics to concrete the lesson. I would offer them hands-on activities that relate to the lesson so they can see, hear, touch, and move. I would allow students to show their learning in various formats, such as a PowerPoint presentation or role-playing. Students with emotional and behavioral disorders are characterized by the inability to learn that has no basis in sensory, intellectual, or other health factors. Not every student will qualify for IDEA services unless it has a detrimental effect on their learning. Students are unable to build relationships with other students or teachers, and they feel constant anxiety, sadness, or fear when there's otherwise no reason to. It encompasses generalized anxiety, separation anxiety, specific phobias, panic disorders, mood disorders. Sometimes they are terrified to leave home or someone they feel a close attachment to. A specific phobia is an unrealistic fear of an object or situation. Other students will have panic attacks that result in debilitating symptoms. School can be a source of social anxiety because the child is severely afraid of being judged negatively. Mood disorders are when a child's mood can go from depressed to euphoric. Bipolar is an example of this. They exhibit externalizing and internalizing behaviors. Internalizing is when they withdraw themselves from others. Bullying is an example of externalizing behaviors. Unfortunately, academic success is lower for students with emotional and behavioral disorders. For universal design, I would allow the student to use technology so that they can track their behavior and learn to self-regulate. We would play the good behavior game, which is a classroom-centered intervention that involves the whole class. It combines mastery learning with the application of behavioral strategies. In this way, the teacher and the peers can model conflict resolution skills so the whole class learns to work as a team. ADHD IDEA does not specify a specific definition for ADHD, but rather lists it under the category of other health impairments. Once again, a medical diagnosis does not qualify a student for IDEA services unless those symptoms significantly impact their learning. ADHD often exists with learning disabilities, emotional behavioral disorders, and intellectual disabilities. The American Psychological Association categorizes ADHD as primarily inattentive, which is when they are not able to pay attention to details, they lack organizational skills, and the inability to focus. Predominantly hyper and impulsive is they cannot sit still in their seat, wait their turn to speak. There's excessive talking, running, or climbing at inappropriate times. It's like they're always on the go. Or some students have a combination of both. Children with ADHD have challenges academically and socially due to their inability to focus on school. They can possibly qualify for a 504 plan due to their unpleasant classroom behaviors. To work with these students, I could use preferential seating to eliminate noise or distractions. I could teach my whole class organizational and goal-setting skills. I could pair that student with another student of similar interests. This will aid in social skills development and their focus. And I could use goal attainment scaling so that students can see their progress and give rewards when those goals are met. An intellectual disability is characterized by low IQ scores, but those don't mean anything when a teacher can see the capabilities in their students. They lack adaptive behavior skills, which is the conceptual, practical, and social skills needed to function in everyday life, such as reading, writing, money concepts, self-esteem, and occupational skills. Many times they struggle with applying what they learn from the classroom to life outside the classroom. For example, counting money in the classroom versus counting money at the grocery store. Sometimes their motivation runs low, so they need a little prompting from others before acting. Much of this comes from the fact that they feel like they don't have much control over things in their life. Students with an intellectual disability struggle to recall from the short and long-term memories and then use that information to carry out a task. I think all children are learning to regulate their emotions and learn the skills needed outside of the class. So as a whole class, we would work together so that every student learns these life skills. We would ignore the inappropriate behaviors by others while focusing on the positive ones. My students and I can identify motivational strategies that have worked before and apply them to what we're doing. They can use a rocket reader so that they can learn the main ideas and hear the same stories the rest of the class is hearing. My students with intellectual disabilities can express their learning by the use of dictation software, and we will use the self-determined model of instruction planned out in 3 phases. What is my goal? What is my plan? And what have I learned? Together we will identify the problem, any and all potential solutions and barriers, and identify the consequences of each solution. Autism once encompassed a host of disorders such as Asperger's and Rett syndrome, but it was eventually renamed autism spectrum disorder. Students with autism struggle with communication and socialization. They don't often understand how to act appropriately in social situations, so close friendships are hard to come by. Oftentimes they engage in repetitive and sometimes harmful behaviors. They have a tendency to be obsessed with something such as a movie and will repeat words or phrases over and over. These problem behaviors are a form of communication to either obtain something they want or avoid something unpleasant, or as a response to sensory stimulation, also called stimming. Together we would use assistive technology to facilitate communication, such as a picture board, and use these visual images to teach abstract ideas. We would use social stories to help all students understand social situations, social cues, and appropriate responses. A student with a traumatic brain injury. This must be caused by an external source, such as a fall. Falls are also the #1 cause of traumatic brain injuries. It encompasses an open head injury or a closed. They often share similarities with students who have learning disabilities, communication disorders, emotional and behavioral disorders, and intellectual disabilities because of the way it affects their cognition, language, memory, attention, reasoning, abstract thinking, among many others. For universal design, I would use appropriate instructional pacing to deliver my content in smaller chunks and allow them to respond in smaller chunks. I would check in with them frequently and allow them to respond in various formats. I would give them more time to think, and then I would adjust my instruction immediately if they are not learning the content. We would discuss what they did correct and instruct on what their incorrect responses were. I would use rubrics so the students know exactly what is required of them, and use cooperative learning groups to help the students stay organized and on top of their memory skills. Hearing loss. Full hearing loss or partial affects a student's education experience, but not their capacity to learn. It can either be in one or both ears. A student is considered deaf if an audiology exam shows their loss is between 70 to 90 decibels and cannot hear with amplification. Otherwise, they are considered hard of hearing. Students with hearing loss will have language delays that are considered mild to severe depending on their level of hearing loss and the amount of visual and auditory stimulation they receive at a young age. Many times, sign language is taught. It's a form of communication that uses hand, body, and facial movements to communicate. For universal design, we would also use graphic organizers to teach the relationships among concepts and the multiple meanings of words. We would use visual aids, pictures, and drawings so students can visualize the concepts I'm teaching. An authentic experience includes helping my students understand what cold is and why they would need to use mittens to go outside on a winter day. I would also consider adding acoustics to the room and take the opportunity to teach the whole class sign language because that will only benefit them now and in the future. A visual impairment is diagnosed by testing acuity. This test is mostly used to determine Social Security eligibility, and it tells us nothing about the person or how they learn and what they are capable of. Sometimes it occurs with another disability. Other times a student shows phenomenal abilities in the areas of music. Children with a visual impairment do not have the opportunity to learn incidentally through their environment, so in many cases they lack motor, language, and social skills. However, given the appropriate opportunities, they can quickly catch up to where they need to be. It can be congenital or adventitious. We would use adapted materials such as Braille and large print maps and assistive technology such as an electronic Braille note taker. I would have real objects on their desk for them to manipulate. Gifted and talented students. There isn't one single definition for this, but most states have adapted some form of a modified federal version. Students show exceptional capabilities in more than one area. Gardner introduced the multi-dimensional model of intelligence that broadens it to include musical, bodily kinesthetic, linguistical, logical, mathematical, spatial, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistics. Students show higher abilities intellectually, cognitively, creatively, physically, and leadership. For universal design, we would use differentiating instruction so that I can help each student on the various levels that they require. It also acts as an excellent peer teaching opportunity. I left multicultural to the end of my presentation because I feel it is important to remember that my students will come to me from various cultures and socioeconomic backgrounds with varying abilities. Each and every one of them deserves the opportunity to have a meaningful education and experience that includes my teaching them and my learning about other cultures. Because there is no reason to ever define a child by their disability. A disability does not define their capabilities. Thank you.